Have you wondered if recession is coming and who are the buyers that are buying into Singapore's property? So whenever we talk about whether or not Singapore is going to a recession or whether or not Singapore's property or real estate market is sustainable, personally, I will always look at supply and demand. Alright, moving into demand first, who are the buyers that is actually in the market right now? Of course, if we look into our population census, the important thing to take note of is today, what kind of population numbers that Singapore is targeting to hit. Back then in 2012, I believe there was a study that was done, a projected population growth of what Singapore's population will be by year 2030. Now, if we look into these numbers, by 2030, we should be hitting about 6.5 to 6.9 million. However, because of COVID, I don't think we are able to hit that even by 2024. So our current population now is about 6.04 million in year 2024. The key thing here is this. Today, population is our only resources. Singapore is a small country, we do not have any natural resources, so we rely on population growing in order for us to remain at a GDP growth of 2 to 3% annually and a productivity growth of about 1 to 2% annually. Again, when it comes down to who Singapore is bringing in are your PRs and of course your foreigners that will contribute to this population growth. Unfortunately, Singapore's growth rate or birth rate cannot keep up to that 6.5 to 6.9 million population growth. So then we have to look for external residency coming in from foreign countries. So before I continue, please remember to help to like, share and subscribe. And if you have any questions, do feel free to leave it in the comment section. If not, drop me a DM and I'll reply accordingly. Coming to these numbers again, when we talk about how the population is growing, like I mentioned, unfortunately, Singapore's birth rate cannot keep up with how fast we want to grow. So we have to bring in this from foreign countries as well. So foreigners coming into Singapore, your PRs, and of course your PRs convert into Singaporeans, this will be the main group of demand coming into Singapore, buying Singapore's real estate. The next question is affordability. Can they afford to buy? And I want to look at the average household income currently, because if 10 years ago, in year 2010, 2012, if I'm hearing my friends' parents making $10,000 and above, to me, I feel like that's above average income already. But in today's market sentiments, if a household income is $10,000, as we can see from the average household income, it has grown. Now the household income is already $10,869. You are just making average household income. I want to bring your attention to this chart over here. On my extreme right, this is year 2021. What I have is up to year 2023. If I were to use this and I'll notice 5,000 to 9,000 or 10,000, this range, can you see in year 2021, 5.1 dropped to 4.4, 4.8 dropped to 4.3, 4.7 dropped to 4.3, 4.7 dropped to 4.3, again 4.4 dropped to 4.2, and then this income 10,000 to 11,000 remain similar. Where did this group of income earners port into? They all grew in the bracket. And most importantly, the scary part that grew the most is actually this income bracket over here. So from $14,000 to as high as $20,000 and above, what are we seeing today is 2.8% grew to 3%. 5.9% in the 15,000 to almost 17,500 bracket grew to 6.4%. Your 17.5 to 20K grew about 0.1%. Your 20,000 and over 14.4%, it grew to 18.8%, a staggering 4.4% growth in terms of this category. So this is the household income right now. For this kind of household income, the affordability will be beyond that $2 million, $3 million already. So these are the group of people that will be able to afford as our country progresses and our income also grows. These are the group of people who will be able to then purchase your properties as well. Of course, not forgetting this group of homeowners would also have sold their flat or made money from their property, and this allowed them to actually free roll into the next property as well. Okay, so if we are talking about how stable Singapore real estate market is and where is the prices heading, right? Personally, I will always like to look at this private property price index, and I will always segment it into two different segments. The first segment being the 2013 period. This will be my post cooling measure. And prior to that, right, I will have anything that happens before 2013. This is my pre-cooling measure. Now, the key difference right here is if you look at the pre-cooling measure time period, right, you look at Asia financial crisis, you'll see a dip from 1997 all the way to Q3 of 1998 before we see a V-shaped recovery in the Q2 period of year 2000. To follow suit in year 2000, what actually happened was actually our dot-com crash. Now, followed on by a dot-com crash, the reason why it's not a V-shaped recovery is a U-shaped recovery because right after dot-com, it followed on by SARS. So the recovery time period took about almost a good 3 to 4 years. The recovery only started to happen in year 2004 towards 2005 before climbing all the way up to 2008. 2008 saw our GFC, Global Financial Crisis, also known as the Lehman Brothers collapse. This itself, right, is very short-lived. If you notice, this V-shaped recovery is relatively quick. In fact, the housing market, private property price index recovered in probably about a year or so, as we see the line peak towards 2013. Now the prices corrected itself. Now this dip in prices was not caused by anything that was uncontrolled. So what do I mean by pre-cooling measure period? Anything that happens within the pre-cooling measure period all the way up to 2013, these are economical crises that we cannot control. However, came 2013. Now, in this market segment right now, 2013, I would say that our prices is a little bit more controlled market. And why do I say so? Because in the 2013 cooling measure period, we saw price correcting itself, cooling itself. The key thing that we need to understand, why did the 2013 cooling measures actually allow price to cool down? Before the 2013 period, there were 3 groups of buyers. Of course, number 1, we have our home buyers. Number 2, we have our investors. And number 3, this is actually 1 in 3 buyers out there in the market prior to 2013. This was our speculators. Why is this important to take note of? Because in 2013, when the cooling measures came out, the implementation of ABSD, LTV, and of course seller stamp duty thoroughly eliminated this group of buyers, which is the speculators. So what is the key difference between a speculator and a home investor? Of course, for homestayers, I don't have to explain much. These are the group of buyers who buy for long-term holding, who buy for rental, for example. Prior that to 2013, back then in 2010, 2011, 2012, as a brand new agent back then, I do remember that there wasn't LTV as controlled as the 2013 cooling measures. So clients who were earning maybe $4,000, $5,000 could purchase a $1 million property and still rent it out. There were no loan to value limits as compared to currently, whereby we are currently tied down by the LTV and of course TDSR. This allows us to buy multiple properties at any given time. So this itself would also mean that today the speculators were being eliminated from the market, and that's why when we see the prices correcting itself in 2013, there's a big group of buyers missing. Henceforth, the price is able to cool down and correct itself. So if you want to understand a little bit more about how the macro perspective of Singapore market is, and more importantly, how this macro events affect Singapore prices, feel free to drop me a comment. If not, feel free to drop me a DM and I'll reply accordingly. Of course, do not forget to help me like, share, and subscribe. So moving on, why did the prices continuously climb after 2013's cooling measure? Back then in 2017, when price after correction from 2013 to 2017, we do see prices continue climbing towards an upward trend. If we talk about removal of speculators from the market, and now once the speculators were removed and the market cooled, this price increment, this would what I term as natural demand. These are your home buyers and your long-term investors who buy into the market today to hold on to this property minimally for 3 to 5 years. And yet, we are seeing the price continuously climbing upwards. And with the implementation of cooling measures for foreigner ABSD of 30% and 60% foreigner ABSD, now we are effectively removing a huge chunk of foreign buyers from the market already, and this market still continue to climb, which means that the demand comes from your local Singaporeans and your PR buyers themselves. So this continuous climb in prices also is determined by today's controlled market. And why do I think that a controlled market is important? Can you imagine that today we go into recession or we go into any form of economical crisis? And in order for the Singapore government to regulate the property price index or the property prices, what can we do to ensure that today our property prices remain sustainable and it does not collapse overnight? Few things that we might be able to tweak. Of course, number 1 is additional buyer stamp duty. By reducing ABSD, this will then help foreigners come back into Singapore to purchase Singapore's property, or the removal of second property ABSD for Singaporeans, or today they can look into tweaking TDSR or loan to value to ensure that today Singaporeans are able to then buy properties or be able to transact properties. So there are many multitude things that Singapore can do to ensure that today our prices don't collapse. So with these very strong fundamentals of cooling measures in place, this is how the Singapore government has protected our prices from collapsing and, more importantly, from taking a downward spiral. So after hearing this and you still feel confused and you do not understand what's going on, do feel free to leave your comments in the comment section, drop me a DM, and I'll reply to you accordingly as fast as I can. Most importantly, do help me like, share, and subscribe to my channel to continue bringing this content to you. Thank you.